Welcome back, and thank you for listening to Xenozoic Xenophiles, a fan podcast devoted to the comic series Xenozoic Tales, a post-apocalyptic adventure series filled with Cadillacs and dinosaurs, from creator, writer, and artist Mark Schultz. I'm Darren.
And I'm Ruth, and this is a fan podcast. We're not affiliated with Mark Schultz, and the opinions expressed are just ours. We're doing this podcast because we enjoy reading and talking about Xenozoic Tales and other worlds created by Mark Schultz.
In this episode, we're stepping into one of those other worlds and covering the first issue of SubHuman, which is a 4-issue miniseries from 1998.
The series is written by Mark Schultz and Michael Ryan and features cover art and character designs by Mark, with additional art by Roger Peterson.
For all of the Xenozoic Tales fans out there, please don't worry. We'll be coming back to discuss more of Xenozoic Tales in the near future, including the comics from Topps and the animated TV series.
Since we're covering the first issue of a new series, we might have some new listeners, so let's share a little about the title of our podcast. Of course, the word Xenozoic comes from the title of the comics.
Xeno is described as something that is strange or foreign, while Zoic refers to a geological period of time. So Xenozoic basically means strange age.
And a xenophile is someone who is interested in foreign lands and foreign cultures, and that word describes us perfectly, because we're definitely interested in foreign lands and cultures, just like those found in Xenozoic Tales and the other worlds of Mark Schultz.
Of course, some of you might be familiar with the series under the title Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which has occasionally been used for reprint collections as well as for video games, board games, and an animated TV series.
If you love these stories and the wonderful art, be sure to join the Facebook page Mark Schultz Xenozoic Tales and Other Stories for the latest official news and information.
As all of you know from our earlier episodes, Mark Schultz is currently working on a new Xenozoic Tales graphic novel, and Flesk Publications has announced there will be a Kickstarter campaign for the new book when it's ready. More information will be released later, and we'll definitely let everyone know when it starts.
Flesk Publications is the home of wonderful books from a variety of creators, including fantastic books from Mark Schultz, including the collection Xenozoic, that contains all the Xenozoic Tales stories written and illustrated by Mark Schultz, as well as the exciting book Storms at Sea, and a beautiful portfolio, and the Carbon art book series.
So be sure to check out the terrific site for Flesk Publications, which features those books from Mark Schultz, as well as other wonderful books from talented creators including Frank Cho, Bruce Timm, Steve Rude, William Stout, and many others.
We enjoy sharing listener feedback and being part of conversations with listeners on social media.
Please feel free to write in anytime and let us know what you think about the series. We'd love to know what you like best about the art and the stories, and how you first discovered the work of Mark Schultz.
Later in this episode, we'll share feedback and we'll provide our email address and other ways to contact us at the end of the show.
Xenozoic Xenophiles is part of the Rad Adventures Network. If you enjoy the show, please consider checking out our other podcasts that are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and YouTube.
Trekker Talk is a fan podcast devoted to the adventures of 23rd century bounty hunter Mercy St. Clair from the pages of the sci-fi comic Trekker by writer and artist Ron Randall.
And Warlord Worlds is a fan podcast devoted to the comic creations of writer and artist Mike Grell, including The Warlord, John Sable, and Green Arrow.
Mark Schultz, Ron Randall, and Mike Grell are our 3 favorite comic creators. Their stories are filled with adventure and interesting characters, and their art is excellent.
We'll include links to those other podcasts in our show notes, but for now, let's talk about SubHuman right after this message from another podcast you might enjoy.
Siskoid's blog of geekery is Doctor Who,
Babylon 5,
animation,
comics,
toys,
Godzilla,
Star Trek,
cats, crypto,
role-playing games,
Battle Shovel,
X-Files,
music, podcast,
board games,
Jack Kirby, Alien
movie,
Nation,
Kung Fu,
dinosaur,
and so much more. Siskoid's blog of geekery, 10 years of content, more than 7,500 posts, still going strong at siskoid.blogspot.com.
When you think of podcasts about religion, you probably think of this.
But at least one religion podcast sounds more like this.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Dorkness to Light is a relatively geeky production in which Alan and Emily discuss topics of faith, religion, and spirituality.
But we do so through the lens of pop culture, like movies, TV, and comic books. because we're nerds.
Our primary focus will be on Christianity, because that's what we know best. But all religious content is on the table.
Well, think about it, Scully. From vampirism to Catholicism.
This is an occasional cast, to be recorded and released as the mood strikes, with topics ranging from in-depth reviews to personal rants about some small aspect of theology or church history, because we're theological nerds.
If these topics interest you, check out dorknesstolight.blogspot.com for our more regular content.
Or dorknesstolight.tumblr.com for our more irregular content. Memes and puns mostly. My bad.
Dorkness to Light.
Often irreverent, rarely sacrilegious.
SubHuman number 1, November 1998. Rapture and the Deep. Written by Michael Ryan and Mark Schultz. Cover, Mark Schultz. Art, Roger Peterson. Colors, Dave Stewart. Letters, Tracy Munsey. Designer, Leah Rabashi. Assistant Editor, Ben Abernathy. Editor, Philip Diamara. Publisher, Mike Richardson.
Our story opens underwater in the depths of the Arctic Ocean. A woman floats, without a dive suit, surrounded by jellyfish. Cables and hoses connect her to a nearby bathysphere. We hear thoughts. Are these thoughts the woman's dreams, or is someone talking to her inside her head? We know the average survival time for a human in these icy waters is 9.5 minutes, but the mysterious woman has been submerged for 57 minutes. Divers approach the woman in the bathysphere, and they're confused by what they see. Just then a large and ancient-looking sea creature swims past. One of the divers panics and shoots it with a harpoon gun. On the other side of the planet, a ship sits off the coast of Thurston Island in the Antarctic Ocean. On board, Dr. Pandora Bergquist is in a panic. The XB-22 bathysphere, which they lowered into the ocean beneath their ship an hour earlier, has suddenly vanished. The research team desperately examines their equipment, searching for any signs of the bathysphere, and then they begin to receive a distress signal from the XB-22. But instead of coming from the Antarctic, where they are located, the distress signal is coming from the Arctic. Back in the Arctic Ocean, the bathysphere has been retrieved from the ocean's depths by a United Nations research ship led by Captain Jubal Early. The mysterious woman has been rushed to the medical bay, where she has been immersed in warm water to begin to increase the temperature of her core in the hopes of saving her life. Meanwhile, one of the crewmen slips away and sends a mysterious message to the Kronos, another ship patrolling nearby. We heard the thoughts again inside the woman's head. Is it a dream or a conversation? We see the woman, but now she is wearing armor and carrying a sword that is covered in blood from the dead bodies surrounding her. Just then, she wakes up. Once she is fully recovered, Captain Early stops by for a conversation. The mysterious woman is Krill Stromer, a research scientist who was in the Antarctic Ocean earlier that same day, testing a bathysphere prototype developed by her grandmother. Captain Early doubts the story, but he is familiar with the name Stromer. Early notices that Krill keeps staring at her hands and asks what's wrong, and she replies that something down there changed her, but she can't remember. Something terrible happened, and something terrible is yet to come, she says. Krill accompanies Captain Early to the deck of the ship, where he's informed that a plane wants permission to land to collect Krill Stromer. Early isn't ready to let go of this mystery and warns the plane away. But Krill stops and puts her hands on the deck of the ship, and then tells Early that there is a bigger problem. Just then, giant tentacles from a huge sea creature come out of the ocean and begin to wrap around the ship. Early and his men pull out their weapons and begin shooting at the bizarre-looking creature, but their guns have little impact. Krill hears the voice inside of her head again, saying, "Dive deep." She runs and grabs onto the ship's anchor just as it drops into the sea.
The stunning cover by Mark Schultz should make any comic or adventure fan want to pick up this book. It shows Krill floating in the ocean surrounded by jellyfish as the large sea creature swims in the background. In the back of the issue, we get 2 pages of character art and designs by Mark Schultz, establishing the look and feel of the story, and interior artist Roger Peterson does a terrific job of capturing that look and feel in the book. The story is mysterious and moves swiftly as it switches back and forth from the Arctic to the Antarctic. As a reader, we feel just the right amount of confusion as we get just enough information to make us want to know more. For Xenozoic Tales fans, this is the perfect companion book. You can imagine this being part of the same world, but existing in a completely different period of history. The story feels modern, but also ancient, and it's even a little futuristic. It's that perfect balance of mystery and science fiction with the retro feel of a pulp adventure. The art is equally terrific and very complementary to the story. I love the opening sequence under the Arctic Ocean, and the first panel in the book looks really three-dimensional with krill surrounded by jellyfish. I also love page 11 that shows krill in the past dressed in armor and wielding a sword. Very intriguing. The sequence with the sea creature attacking the ship at the end of the issue is exciting, and the cliffhanger ending as krill dives into the ocean definitely leaves you eager to read the next issue. I like that the woman's name is Krill. Something that seems small and insignificant, but that nourishes some of the largest creatures on the planet. I'm sure there's definitely some interesting subtext there. And I like that the issue is dedicated to Jacques Cousteau and Lloyd Bridges. We're longtime fans of Jacques Cousteau and always loved watching his documentaries on PBS, and we used to be members of the Cousteau Society. And we're also fans of actor Lloyd Bridges, who starred in the popular adventure TV series Sea Hunt in the late 1950s and early 1960s. Next up is listener feedback, when we share the emails and messages we've received since last time.
Thanks to everyone for your comments. Your support and encouragement is great, and we appreciate everyone who took time to get in touch and to share your thoughts.
Mark Schultz himself was kind to drop us a line saying, "Congratulations, and many thanks for the latest Xenophiles podcast. As usual, I'm in awe of your professionalism, thorough knowledge of the subject, enthusiasm, and of course, your smooth as silk vocal deliveries. And I'm so happy that there are listeners out there paying attention. Thank you, Mark."
Catherine Wilson shared that Xenozoic Tales 14 is hands down her favorite single comic ever. I'm so lucky I have one. That's awesome, Catherine.
Green Lantern HG wrote, "After an emotional weekend, leave it to the fabulous Sutherlands to save the day. Great episode, guys. I don't get tired of hearing you talk about Jack and Hannah. I hope you grace us with another episode soon. And we hope you're doing well too, friend."
John Baker of 3 by Space and the Beyond the Rim live radio show wrote, "Another tour de force of fun and enlightenment. I've missed you guys, so when I saw this was up, I was on it quickly. My joy only heightened as you talked about this issue 14. So interesting to hear your take on the work. As always, enjoy the heck out of your podcast and look forward to some more. Thanks for your passion." And thank you, John.
Jerry Green of the Professor Frenzy Show said, "Thanks for showcasing these terrific books. And that's an awesome preview video. Nice work. Thanks, Jerry."
Chad Hindall, who's the excellent musician who did the Xenozoic Blues song that we highlighted a while back, wrote to point out something he heard while watching Walking with Dinosaurs with his kids. He said there's a moment where the main dinosaur says, "We need to talk about the future." And the other dinosaur says, "Like the Xenozoic?" Wow, thanks, Chad. It's so much fun to spot a reference to Xenozoic Tales out there in the universe. Thanks for sharing that.
That brings us to a note from Jeffrey Willis, who wanted to be sure we didn't miss an interesting appearance in issue 6 of Dial H for Hero. There's a nod to Xenozoic Tales with a character called Dundee Rex. She's dressed in a red top and white pants and rides a T-Rex that is equipped with rockets mounted on the sides of a saddle. Awesome. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Coincidentally, that fun link Jeffrey used to let us see the character led us to our friend Siskoid's blog of geekery. If you're a fan of comics, Doctor Who, Star Trek, and lots of other geek topics, be sure to check out his website. He has an amazing amount of content on so many topics, and he includes links to a variety of podcasts that he's involved with over at the excellent Fire and Water Podcast Network. Next, we want to extend our thanks to everyone who supported the show on social media since last episode. These are people who commented or shared posts from us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, and we sincerely appreciate all the support.
Before we get started, let me say if we miss a name, just let us know and we'll correct it next time. And please forgive us if we mispronounce your name. Just write to let us know and we'll be sure to correct that next time as well.
Alberto Ramirez, Austin Appleby, Brett Brock, Brian Mulvey, Carlos Aviado, Catherine Wilson, Chandler Zero Art, Chris of the Professor Frenzy Show and Memory Minute Monday, Claudio Ramirez, Clinton Robinson of Coffee and Comics and Fan Film Fridays, Creator Talks with Christopher Calloway, Colin Stapleton from the Worst Comics Podcast Ever, Derek William Crabb of the Fanholes Podcast and History of Comics on Film, Dr. G, Man of Nerdology of the Pulp to Pixel Podcast Network, Ed and Terry Moore of Till Productions, Gary Anderson, Gary Crutchley, Gene Hendricks from the Hammer Strikes and Anime Freaks, Jerry Acerno, Jerry Green of the Professor Frenzy Show, Giles Kawa, Giovanni Luisi, Green Lantern HG, J.D. Hotchkiss, Jared Albrecht, the Yard Sale Artist from the Longbox Crusade and On Her Majesty's Secret Podcast, Jean-Luc Serrano, Jeffrey Willis of the Hollow World blog and Wave Your Geek Flag, Joe Crawford of the blog for the Non-Discerning Reader, John Baker, who does sci-fi TV reviews at 3F by Space and the Beyond the Rim live radio show,
Karen Williams of the Sweet Between the Pages blog, Carl Bloomberg, Kirk Spencer, Laurel Phillips, a.k.a. Mountain Flower, Lawrence Sarrock, Luis Guillermo del Coral, Marcin Art, Marianne Guilla-Duro, Michael Lane of Comics in the Golden Age, Mike Mayo, Noel Savory, Oscar Rubio, Pat Sampson of the Longbox Crusade, Paul Hicks of Waiting for Doom and the DC OCD podcast, Pierre Grott, Professor Allen of the Relatively Geeky Podcast Network, Randy Andrews of Soundtrack Alley, Reggie Hancock of the Cosmic Treadmill Podcast and Weird Science DC, Scott Connor, Jean-Luc Picard, Sean Ross of Pulp to Pixel and the Secret Wars and Beyond Podcast, Talk Nerdy to Me, The Comic Syndicate, Thiago Oliveira, Podcrasher Tim Price, Vitor dos Santos Barbosa, Will Pagan, and a big thanks to Mark Schultz, Xenozoic Tales and Other Stories Facebook page for sharing our episodes.
As we close out this episode, we have some very sad news. Steve Stiles, who did the art for the backup stories in the original Xenozoic Tales comics, passed away since our last episode.
We're so sorry for the loss and want to share our condolences with his family and friends. We admired his work so very much and had hoped to arrange an interview with him for our show.
Mark Schultz wrote a wonderful tribute on his Xenozoic Tales and Other Stories Facebook page, and we want to share just a few excerpts from that post.
Steve was one of the most versatile cartoonists I've known. I got to work with him when he assisted on Xenozoic Tales.
Dennis Kitchen suggested Steve as a possible addition to the book, and it turned out that Steve's versatility and our mutual interest in Harvey Kurtzman's EC War stories made for a good pairing.
Steve inked 2 of my stories in Xenozoic Tales, number 2, and then from issues 3 through 14, he drew the backup stories from my scripts. It was a joy to collaborate with him. He knew how to tell a story with clarity, humor, and impact.
His compelling visual storytelling helped flesh out the Xenozoic world. I'd always hoped that circumstances would allow for the opportunity to entice him back for at least one more Xenozoic story. That never happened, but it seems that we can still look forward to an anthology of Steve's hypercomics work. Rest in peace, Steve.
That was a beautiful tribute from Mark Schultz. We'll all miss Steve Stiles. Before we go, we want to provide our contact information. Please let us know your thoughts through email, Facebook, or Twitter.
If you want to contact us directly or have something you would like to have read on the show, then please send an email to xenozoicxenophiles@gmail.com.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the name Xenozoic Xenophiles, and you can also visit xenozoicxenophiles.com for links to our social media pages.
You can listen to our show through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher, and all of our episodes are always available at xenozoicxenophiles.com.
You can also find the show on YouTube as part of the Rad Adventures Podcast Network. That's RAD, R-A-D, which is short for Ruth and Darren.
On the Rad Adventures YouTube channel, you'll find all of the episodes of all of our podcasts, including Xenozoic Xenophiles, as well as Trekker Talk about 23rd Century Bounty Hunter Mercy St. Clair by Ron Randall, and Warlord Worlds about the comic creations of Mike Grell, including the Warlord, John Sable, and Green Arrow.
If you like the show, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Stitcher. Every review helps the podcast be more likely to show up in search results.
And on YouTube, we hope you'll subscribe to the channel and give us some likes on the videos.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll come back next time for another new episode of Xenozoic Xenophiles.
Xenozoic Xenophiles is a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. For more information, please visit comicspodcasts.com. We are not affiliated with Mark Schultz or the various companies that have published the series. The views expressed on the show are solely ours. Music is taken from the album Movie Tunes, Background Music, Songs and Loops, Volume 2. We make no money from this podcast, and no copyright infringement is intended.